My name is Nancy Neerman. I am the Assistant Director of the Education Debt Consumer Assistance Program, otherwise known as EDCAP. We're here today to talk to you about forgiveness programs in the student loan system, particularly the income-driven repayment plan account adjustment, which is a program with a looming deadline. So just a little bit of housekeeping. I'm here with the director of the program, Carolina Rodriguez. She is experiencing some camera issues, so she's going to remain off camera, but she is going to be behind the scenes answering your questions. If you do have questions during the course of the presentation, feel free to type them into the Q&A. Carolina is going to be monitoring the questions during the Q&A, and then we'll break periodically to make sure that everybody gets the benefit of the answers for certain questions, and then we'll probably have enough time at the end also to open it up to any additional questions that you may have. So with that said, I'm going to just share my screen and then we can get started. Carol, can you confirm that you can see the screen?
Yes.
Okay. Very good. So you may or may not be aware that over 3.7 million people, probably close to 3.9 million people at this point, have had their student loan balances forgiven during the Biden administration. Most of that has really come in the last sort of 18 months. And that's through various programs, but there's one program in particular called the IDR Account Adjustment that has that's been responsible for a lot of that forgiveness, that has a looming deadline that's coming up in about 12 days. April 30th, 2024 is the deadline for taking action if you need to take action to benefit from this very important program. So the purpose of this presentation and this workshop is to make sure that you understand what this program is about, that you know or understand what it is you might or might not have to do to make sure that you get the full benefit of this one-time account revision. So the IDR account adjustment is basically a fix to some forgiveness programs, specifically the income-driven repayment forgiveness program, which forgives payments by virtue of being in any of the IDR plans, and public service loan forgiveness programs, that have been around for a long period of time. IDR forgiveness has been around since 1994. PSLF has been around since 2007, but operationally, they really have not functioned very well, and they've been poorly administered. And up until really a little bit more than a year ago, almost nobody had gotten forgiveness towards these programs because it was just too difficult to navigate. So the Biden administration introduced the IDR account adjustment, which is a mechanism that is going to allow borrowers to get retroactive credit towards these very important forgiveness programs that will essentially get you caught up to where you should be or where you think you should be in making progress to get your loans to get closer to forgiveness. So remember, the IDR account adjustment is a fix to existing programs. It's really, these existing programs are not new. They've been around for a long period of time. So what will the IDR account adjustment do for these different forgiveness programs? It's going to assess retroactive credit, so backwards-looking credit, based on your loan status history. So it's not really looking at whether or not you made payments over the years. It's looking at what loan status your loans were in. So a loan status just indicates whether or not you're required to make a payment. So you're going to get credit for periods that you might have been in repayment, even if you didn't make those payments. You're going to get credit for some time spent in non-COVID related forbearances if you were in a forbearance for 12 consecutive months, or if you were in a forbearance over the life of your loans for 36 cumulative months, you would get credit for all of the forbearances that you were in over the life of the loan. So that could be more than 36 qualifying months. You're going to get credit for most periods that you might have been in deferment prior to 2013, and any period that you might have been in an economic hardship deferment from 2013 or later. You're also, very importantly, this last bullet point on this slide is you're going to get credit for periods that you periods prior to any consolidations that you may have been done. So if you're familiar with any of these programs, up until recently, if you consolidated your loans, you would lose all retroactive credit to these forgiveness programs. And your credit clock would basically start counting from the day that you did the consolidation. Under the IDR account adjustment, they're going to look back as far as mid-1994. So if your loans go all the way back to that point or anytime in between, they're going to look back all the way to the inception of your loans or as far back as 1994 and give you credit regardless of whether you have consolidated your loans. So even if you consolidated once, twice, 3 times, we've had clients that have consolidated 4 and 5 times over many, many years. You don't have to worry about that wiping away retroactive credit. You're going to get that credit through this IDR account adjustment process. And remember, the IDR account adjustment is a one-time account revision to get everybody caught up and get and award you credit towards these forgiveness programs. So one of the lesser known features of the IDR account adjustment is that if you are a borrower with a lot of different loans and your loans have different repayment histories, so loans can have different repayment histories because they were dispersed at different times. You might have gone to undergraduate school and got a bunch of loans dispersed and went into repayment at the same time for undergrad, and then you worked for a few years, and then you went back to grad school and you got some loans that might be a little bit newer. If you consolidate all of these loans together by the IDR account adjustment deadline, which is April 30th, again, about 12 days away, you will receive the maximum, the loans with the longest repayment history, that credit history is going to be applied to the entire balance. This is the most generous way to get retroactive credit towards forgiveness programs. So let's stop a minute and just try to explain in a little bit more detail what that means and how that works. So if I can bring your attention to the screenshot on the right, this is actually a PSLF tracker from the Mohila website. What I'm going to describe applies to credit for public service loan forgiveness and for income-driven repayment forgiveness. So in this case, this individual has 4 different loans. You can see that the loans have a range of qualifying payment credit, anywhere from 75 qualifying payments from this loan here on the lower right, all the way up to 106 qualifying payments for the 2 loans, loans number 2 and loans number 3. And then you've got 1 at 95 qualifying payments as well. Remember that forgiveness is generally tracked on a loan-by-loan basis. So you can have different forgiveness schedules depending on your loans and when they went into repayment. If this person consolidated all these 4 loans together before April 30th of this year, they are going to get 106 qualifying payments on the entire balance. So essentially, they are moving closer to forgiveness with their entire balance. If they did not consolidate, they would be paying these off loan by loan. And that loan with the 75 qualifying payments, it would take them longer to get to forgiveness than it would for the loan with 106 qualifying payments. And this is going to work whether you're pursuing public service loan forgiveness or income-driven repayment forgiveness. So hopefully that gives you a sense of how this feature of the IDR account adjustment works. But this is a really big benefit for people that might have had loans for a long time. Now, there are some periods of credit that some periods that you might have been had your loans or statuses that you will not get credit for. So you're not going to get credit for any periods that you were in an in-school deferment, anytime you were in a grace period, or time spent in default. With one exception for default, if you are using a program called Fresh Start, which is also a temporary program to get yourself out of default between now and the end of the Fresh Start period, which ends on September 30th. If you get your loans out of default via Fresh Start or via consolidation during this period, you're going to get credit for the period that you might have been in default during the payment pause. So the payment pause is March of 2020 through August of 2023. And by the way, for anybody that was eligible for the COVID forbearance or that payment pause, you are going to get credit towards forgiveness to either of these forgiveness programs, depending on which one you're pursuing if you were eligible for that payment pause and your loans were in forbearance during that time. For public service loan forgiveness, you must meet the employment requirements of that program in order to get credit, and we'll talk about that in a little bit more detail a little bit later. So here are some steps that you need to go through to determine whether or not you need to take action by April 30th in order to get the benefits of the account adjustment. So I should start out by saying that in order to get the full benefits of the account adjustment, you need to make sure that you have direct loans. So direct loans is a type of loan program. It just simply means that your loans are owned and managed directly by the Department of Education. If you were to apply for new loans right now, the only kind of loan that you can get is a direct loan. However, there are some legacy programs out there, legacy loan programs like FELP loans, Perkins loans, HEAL loans, that would not necessarily qualify for the IDR account adjustment because they're not direct. However, they can be consolidated to be made direct. When in the federal student loan system, one of the purposes of a consolidation is to convert loans from one type of program into another program. And right now, the direct consolidation loan program basically converts any loan into a direct consolidation loan. So you would have to consolidate if you have one of these non-direct loans, or in the example that I just gave earlier, if you have all direct loans or any kind of mix of loans, but you have different repayment histories, and you want the benefit of that longest history being applied to the entire balance, you would want to consolidate by April 30th. But it's particularly important if you have non-direct loans. So again, that's the FELP loans, Perkins loans, HEAL loans. You want to get those consolidated by April 30th. That's going to give you the maximum amount of retroactive credit towards your forgiveness programs. Now, that doesn't mean that after April 30th, you won't be able to consolidate those loans and make them eligible for cheaper repayment plans or get extra credit towards forgiveness. You just won't get the most generous retroactive credit, as you can do that through the account adjustment. And in some circumstances, so if you're pursuing public service loan forgiveness, if you consolidate non-direct loans after April 30th, you will get no retroactive credit on your non-direct loans if you do that and you're pursuing PSLF. Now, one caution for Parent Plus borrowers. If you have Parent Plus loans, you want to be very careful about your consolidations. Parent Plus borrowers have a particular set of circumstances that apply to them that makes their situation maybe a little bit more complicated. We can't go into everything in this presentation. What we do urge is that if you have Parent Plus loans, you want to reach out for some help before you do a consolidation, particularly if you're going to be thinking about consolidating Parent Plus loans with loans that you might have for yourself. So there are some things that you have to consider, and we don't want you to be in a worse position after consolidation than you are now. So you want to reach out for help before you do the consolidation there. For most borrowers that are looking to do online consolidations, the easiest way to meet this deadline is to do your consolidation online at your studentaid.gov account. You only have to file the application by April 30th in order to qualify, in order to make your loans qualify for the IDR account adjustment. So consolidations, the entire process can take a couple of months. You don't have to wait for the entire consolidation to be finished. You just have to file the application. The best way to do that is through studentaid.gov. Once you file the application, the date will be in the system. So if you do that before April 30th, you'll have met the requirements. So the next thing that you have to think about is that if you're going to need to accumulate credit towards these different forgiveness programs after April 30th, you're going to need to be, for the most part, in one of the income-driven repayment plans. So there are two basic ways to make payments within the federal student loan system. You can pay via one of the traditional plans where the payment is based on the loan balance, the interest rate, and a predetermined payback period. So that's going to be like paying back just any regular consumer loan, like a mortgage or an auto loan. And the names of these plans would be things like standard, standard fixed, extended, extended graduated, consolidated fixed, or consolidated graduated plans. If you're in any of those plans, those are traditional plans. Typically speaking, well, certainly if you remain in those plans throughout the life of the loan, there is no forgiveness. You just pay them off until until the balances are zero. They will, for most of the plans, payments in those plans will not count towards forgiveness programs. So the other option is to be in something called an income-driven repayment plan. And when we say income-driven or IDR, that's an umbrella term for 4 different plans. And the 4 plans are the SAVE plan. This is the newest plan that was just introduced last summer, which we're going to go into a little bit more detail about. The Payee plan, the IBR plan, which is often confused with IDR, and then the Income Contingent Repayment Plan, or ICR, which is the oldest plan. Parent Plus loans, direct Parent Plus loans are not eligible for any income-driven repayment plans. They can be made eligible for the ICR plan only if they are consolidated. Now, just a quick word about Parent Plus again. There may be a temporary workaround to this limitation to get to having you access only the ICR plan by exploring something called the Parent Plus loophole. Again, that's a little bit too complicated to go into in this presentation, but when you get this this deck, which you will get after the presentation, you can click on the link here. It's going to link to our website, which explains more about the loophole, which is a process that you might be able to use temporarily to get your loans access to cheaper repayment plans like SAVE. If you need to apply for an IDR plan and you haven't done so already, again, the enrollment process is relatively simple. That can be done again on your studentaid.gov account. If you're not consolidating. If you're consolidating your loans, you will be doing an income-driven repayment request during the consolidation itself. But if you don't need to consolidate, you just want to switch into one of these plans, you can do that relatively easily on the studentaid.gov website. So remember, in order to earn credit towards whether it's income-driven repayment forgiveness or PSLF, you're going to need to be in one of these IDR plans going forward after April 30th. Now, income-driven repayment forgiveness is forgiveness that you would get just by being enrolled in any one of these 4 income-driven repayment plans. So if you're enrolled in SAVE or Payee or IBR, if you're making payments for a certain period of time, you would get forgiveness after anywhere from 10 to 25 years, depending on the plan, depending on the type of loan that you've got, and potentially depending on your loan balance as well. For most borrowers, it's going to be a 20 or 25-year path to forgiveness. Just remember, in the IDR forgiveness program, though, there is no employment requirement. So even if you're unemployed, if you're on a $0 repayment plan, or if you're making very, very low payments, it doesn't matter. As long as you're making the required payment in an IDR plan, you will be eligible eventually for this IDR forgiveness. And of course, the IDR account adjustment is going to award you retroactive credit, so that for most people, they're not going to have to spend another 20 or 25 years earning credit towards this forgiveness programs once they've taken into consideration any benefits from the IDR account adjustment. And then finally, you want to track your progress towards these programs. So right now, only the PSLF program has afforded an opportunity for you to, or a method for you to track your progress. Now, up until about a week and a half ago, it was known to be that MOHELA was the loan servicer that managed the PSLF program, and anybody that was pursuing PSLF had to get their loans over to MOHELA. Once your loans were at MOHELA, you had filed something called the employment certification forms, you would have been given a PSLF tracker that lists all of your qualifying payments, your eligible payments, and it shows your progress and how much further you have to go. And that, by the way, is just as a reminder that this example here that we showed earlier is an example of the PSLF tracker on the MOHELA website. Now, about a week and a half ago, the Department of Education announced that they were going to be transitioning the management of the PSLF program away from MOHELA, away from any of the loan servicers, directly to the Department of Education. So what this means is that starting in July, Anybody that's pursuing PSLF will manage their PSLF count and will file their forms, and all the information for tracking is going to be on your federal student aid account at studentaid.gov. So it's no longer going to be on the MOHELA website. In fact, MOHELA is planning on taking down those trackers on May 1st. And there's going to be a period of time between May and July where they're not actually going to process any of the employment certification forms while they do this transition. But eventually, starting in July, all of this information is going to be migrated to studentaid.gov. Which means that you don't have to have your loans at any particular servicer to pursue PSLF, which I think is going to ultimately be an improvement. And I'm going to talk about this in a little bit more detail in a second. For IDR forgiveness, there has not been a means of tracking progress towards this program. However, the department plans to implement a tracker, again, on your federal student aid account at studentaid.gov, hopefully late summer or certainly later this year. So this is going to be the first time ever that you're going to be able to track your progress towards IDR forgiveness, which is huge. You've never been able to do this before, which has left a lot of people in the dark as to how many more payments they need to make towards this program, and it's going to be a game changer when it happens. Okay, so a little bit more about the PSLF servicing changes that I just mentioned. So starting in July, the Department of Education is basically taking over the function of managing the PSLF qualifying payment counts for anybody that's pursuing this program. And that means that what's going to happen is you're going to get a PSLF dashboard and a tracker that's going to be on your federal student aid account at studentaid.gov. May 1st, MOHELA is going to take your tracker down. If you already have a tracker at MOHELA, that's going to go away starting May 1st, and you probably should have gotten an email from MOHELA by now, but if you haven't, you want to make sure that you download all of that information from your tracker. And when you get this deck, we've provided a short video that just kind of walks you through that process and shows you the best way to save the information and the information that you need to save. Between May and July, the department is temporarily suspending the processing of the PSLF employment certification forms. So if you're pursuing PSLF, you have to file these forms that verifies that you've met the employment requirements of the PSLF program. You generally file the forms annually or however often you need to get caught up until you achieve forgiveness. During this time period, though, of suspension, unless you think you have 120 qualifying payments, unless you think you're going to reach that milestone in the next couple of months, we're recommending that you actually don't file the forms right now. I don't think there's going to be a way to upload any manual forms between May and July. And if you do file them or try to file them beforehand, they may kind of get lost in the transition. So if you're not really at the 120 qualifying payments, we are recommending that you just hold off, wait until they're done with this transition. You've been notified that you've got this tracker on PSLF on your federal student aid website, or that the process has been completed, the transition has been completed, and then you use the PSLF help tool to go ahead and file your forms going forward. Now, if you think you're going to reach 120 qualifying payments over the next couple of months, you can file a form using the PSLF help tool. You're going to have to request an electronic signature from your employer to do this. But just keep in mind, there's going to be delay. You're not going to get an immediate response. It's probably going to take them months to process all the backlogs of people who do that. But eventually they will get processed. MOHELA is going to continue to be your servicer if they are your current servicer. So they're going to provide all the other servicing functions like dealing with payments and billing. If you want to file an IDR application by paper, you're going to do that to MOHELA. If you want to apply for forbearance, deferment, it's going to be MOHELA. Your point of contact is going to basically be MOHELA for anything with the exception of your PSLF servicing, your PSLF qualifying payment count. And we've, again, provided a link to the studentaid.gov page that gives you a lot more information about how this process is going to work. All right, Carolina, before I go on, I want to stop and see if there's any questions that need to be addressed, because I think there have been some behind the scenes.
A lot of great questions. Let me just go back really quickly to remember some of them. I just want to clarify. So there's the IDR account adjustment, which is just like, as Nancy has been talking about, a method where the government is just saying, listen, we know we screwed up. We're just going to give people a bunch of credit towards two key programs: the Public Service Loan Forgiveness Program and another program called Income Driven Repayment Forgiveness, which basically says as long as you repay your loans under an income driven repayment plan like SAVE, you get forgiveness after 20 or 25 years, depending on the plan and all that good stuff. For PSLF, you obviously have to follow the protocols and you must meet the employment requirement. For IDRF, there's nothing other than making sure you have direct loans that you need to do to meet the April deadline. Now, if you're not done with the 20 or 25 years, and the way to think about it generally is 20 years if you only had undergrad, 25 years of being in repayment for a graduate. If you're not done and you still need to accumulate a credit towards IDRF, you would then enroll in an income-driven repayment plan like SAVE, IBR, and so forth, right? So again, I just want to emphasize, the only thing you want to make sure by April 30th is that all your loans are direct. As Nancy mentioned and others have brought up, especially with people who went to undergrad and then graduate school, I guarantee you that now is the time, if you haven't done so, to just consolidate them all together to get the same payment count apply, whatever that may be. There is no downside per se right now of doing a consolidation, but if you're gonna do it, you must do it by the deadline. Do not wait, right? Or do not try to do it after without getting more advice. So that's a little bit there. Now, Nancy already mentioned one of the questions was, do you get credit for the time that your loans are in school? In school deferments, the grace period and with some exception, time in default does not count under the IDR account adjustment. So if you were in school for 3 years, don't expect that that time is going to count either towards PSLF or IDRF again if they were in an in-school deferment. Um, there was a question about FFELP loans that I'm gonna reserve because at the end, if we have a few minutes, I'm gonna show you how to look at your FSA account to determine if you need to consolidate. It's gonna be a quick demo, but I think it's gonna give people a sense. Now, the last thing I'll say is there are people who have complex situations or they may be confused at this point, which I do not blame you. Please know that all of our services are free. If you have not heard about us, we are New York State funded. We're kind of one of a kind where we do counseling sessions and really focus on your individual case because it takes that level of detail for us to be able to figure out what type of loans you have, what's your repayment history, and give you proper advice in terms of what, if anything, you need to do to take advantage of any of the relief available right now. So I'll stop there. I'll continue answering some questions. And yeah. Nancy, you may be muted.
Yes, I just realized I was muted. I was just answering some questions behind the scenes while you were talking, Carolina. So let me just address a few of them. If you have Perkins loans and you think you're close to forgiveness, just to be clear, you're going to have to consolidate those before April 30th in order to get forgiveness. So if you think that you're going to get PSLF by August of 2025, but all you have is Perkins loans, consolidate by April 30th, because if you consolidate afterwards, you won't get any retroactive credit on your Perkins loans. And then you can continue paying to finish off what you need to finish off in terms of your forgiveness. Gosh, there was something else that I just mentioned. Oh, for anybody that might have already been awarded 120 or more qualifying payments and you're just sitting there waiting for those loans to be discharged. I can't say 100% for sure, but we think that they are going to discharge all those loans that have reached 120 qualifying payments. If it's reached that on your tracker, we think they're going to discharge those loans before they go into this transition in May. So just stay tuned. Hopefully you will not have to ride out the transition with 120 or more qualifying payments. If you do, you can request a forbearance so that you don't have to pay during that period. But that's our best guess, is that they're gonna try to do that before the transition. Okay, so I'm gonna move on for now, and I know there's still a bunch of lingering questions that Carolina can try to answer, and I know that a couple of you had your hands raised. If you can just hold off with your questions that you want to ask verbally till the end of the presentation, and we'll address that then. Okay, we want to talk a little bit about forgiveness programs. And I think we've kind of described a lot of the first two, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time, but just income-driven repayment forgiveness, we've gone over this. This is just by being in one of these IDR plans, you could get forgiveness anywhere from 10 to 25 years. Public service, and under IDR forgiveness, there is no employment requirement. So IDR forgiveness is going to be the default forgiveness program for people who have very large loan balances compared to their income, which may be moderate to low, but they don't have the employment qualifications to be eligible for faster forgiveness through a program that does have an employment requirement. And of course, the biggest program with an employment requirement is public service loan forgiveness. So for public service loan forgiveness, you'll get your loans forgiven after 10 years of making qualifying payments if you meet the employment requirements, which are that you must work an average of 30 hours a week for one or more qualifying employers at the same time. And a qualifying employer is generally going to be a nonprofit or a governmental organization. There are a couple other forgiveness programs that we just like to highlight. One is called Borrower Defense to Repayment, or BDR. Borrower Defense to Repayment is for people who think that their schools may be guilty of some kind of fraudulent behavior. So maybe they felt that their school misrepresented things like their graduation rates or their job placement rates, and you took out loans because based on relying on that information that turned out to not be true. The BDR process is complicated. It's right now tied up in litigation, so BDR applications really aren't being processed right now, and it can take a very long time to get a decision. However, if you feel that this describes your situation, it may be worth just filing a claim. And you can reach out to us for a one-on-one because the application is kind of a bear. It's 20 to 25 pages, and we can help you with the application. We do recommend, though, that if you're filing one of these applications, they allow you to go into forbearance for, pending the decision, but the decision could take years to get. So we generally recommend that you don't do the forbearance because you probably can pursue other forgiveness programs like IDR forgiveness or PSLF, which you probably should do in conjunction with BDR. It's complicated. You can call us for guidance if you feel that applies to you. And then finally, total and permanent disability discharge, or TPD. This is kind of what it sounds like. This is for people who have some kind of a disability. It doesn't mean that you have to be in a wheelchair. It doesn't mean that you have to be bedridden. It doesn't even mean that you can't work at all. It just means that you have a mental or physical disability that prevents you from earning a livable wage. And this is probably more often used by older borrowers, but it depends on your circumstances. It can be used for younger borrowers as well. It's not that difficult a process if you qualify. There's different ways to get TPD. And if you do qualify and you submit the application, you could have your loans discharged within the space of a couple of months. The Biden-Harris debt relief plan. So I just want to mention this. You might have read about this in the news. Where the Biden-Harris administration, as you know, tried to do broad-based loan forgiveness back in August or October of 2022, or August of 2022, I think is when they announced it. And it got really ultimately shot down by the Supreme Court. So they just recently announced what they're calling Plan B. So this is their next attempt through a slightly different process of trying to provide loan forgiveness on a broader basis, although in a little bit more of a targeted way than what they than what they originally proposed. So I just want to emphasize that this is right now just in the proposal phase. This is not something that you can actually avail yourself out of right now. But if it was approved and implemented, the types of things that you might see forgiveness on are they are proposing waiving up to $20,000 in unpaid accrued and capitalized interest over the life of the loan. If your balances are higher now than they were when your loans first went into repayment, and assuming you meet some income requirements, you could get your entire balances discharged. If you're eligible for certain forgiveness programs but are not enrolled, that would also be a trigger for discharge. If you've been simply paying for 20 or 25 years, regardless of which repayment plan you might have been in, that could be a trigger. Or if you incurred debt for a school that maybe lost their access to federal financial aid because of any kind of, malfeasance or failed to provide sufficient value through some of their programs. So for instance, you're left with a large loan balance, but you don't have a lot of good job prospects. And then for borrowers who are experiencing some kind of hardship, and the hardship can be assessed in a number of different ways. They're going to take into consideration things like your income, your expenses, medical situations, all that kind of stuff. So that's the plan, which is right now in the proposal phase. They're going to be opening it up to public commentary, I think, very soon. I know the idea is to try to implement this quickly. It's gone through something called the negotiated rules process. So that's more than just a stroke of the pen type thing. The one thing I will mention, though, is that it is more than likely going to face another lawsuit. So I think the lawsuits are just waiting in the wings to be filed once this thing becomes law. So whether or not they're going to actually be able to implement any of this before the lawsuits happen and before some judge somewhere basically prevents them from implementing anything is kind of questionable. So the general message is it's great to know that they're trying to do all this stuff behind the scenes, but don't forget that there's a lot of things that you can take advantage of right now, including the IDR account adjustment, that will give you benefits and relief more quickly. And that really brings us to the end of our presentation. When you do get these materials, you're going to have some links at the end of the presentation to different things that we just spoke about that we think that you will find quite useful and helpful. And then, of course, if you feel that you need an individual individual counseling, you're more than welcome to reach out to us via our helpline or our email or through our website. We've got counselors standing ready to try to service people that might need to be consolidated over the next couple of weeks. I will just say, it's going to be a busy time with people trying to get in under the deadline. If your situation does not require consolidation or meeting the deadline on April 30th, we would respectfully request that maybe you wait to contact us until after the deadline is over. If you're not sure, though, by all means, contact us and we'll make sure that we try to get you in. But just letting you know that it's going to be busy, and so the sooner you call, the better. The more chances you are of getting a meeting with us if you need it. So with that, Carolina, I'm going to open it up again to remaining questions, and we may even field some questions verbally if people want to raise their hands.
Yes, and I will do like a quick demo. So we're almost done. So
Right.
I just want to clarify one thing that I feel like a lot of people don't understand about public service loan forgiveness, and that is when you submit your employment certification form to get an updated payment count and you submit it for former employers, you only need to do that once as long as they get your forms and properly process them and you verify that you got credit for those former employers, you're done, right? Like it's only a one-time thing. But for your current employer, the government doesn't have a way to know that you are still working with your current employer. So they say. I'm sure they can figure it out, but that's not the case of how things work. So a lot of people assume that they should just be getting automatically credit for their current employer, even though they haven't filed an updated PSLF form. The way you get credit is based on the employer's signature date on the last form submitted. So if you submitted a PSLF form for your current employer last September, you only got credit up until then. It's not that you're not gonna get the credit, but you must submit an updated PSLF form in order for your account to be updated and for you to know how many qualifying payments you have. The other thing that a lot of people don't know, if your loans are with Mohila and you have a PSLF payment tracker, you must download all your data before the end of the month because there's going to be a transition happening where FSA, as it was probably mentioned, is going to take over that. Now, you're gonna notice, and we'll put down the video for the guidance and you'll have the PowerPoint. There's different tabs on your tracker, and you wanna go through all those tabs to make sure the information is accurate and correct. And if not, either reach out to us or we'll help you figure out how to do it. Nancy, I'm gonna share my screen if that's okay.
Can I just answer one more
Sure.
question? So somebody was, and then yes, we'll go ahead and share the screen. Somebody was asking, they're saying they're concerned because their loans have been consolidated with different repayment counts for years, and they thought that they might have received the IDR account adjustment previously, and they want to know whether there's a better chance of getting updated now. So let me just explain the IDR account adjustment. The only people that have gotten the results of the IDR account adjustment to date are people that have enough qualifying payment to get their loans fully discharged. For everybody else that's just in the process of accumulating qualifying payment credit, you're going to get notified sometime later this year. So you don't actually have that official count, and you may not have to do anything. If you've got all direct consolidation loans at this point, then there's nothing more for you to do. You just basically have to wait until they come out and give you that count. So I hope that clarifies that. And that's
Okay.
it.
Thank you, Nancy. And I know that there's more questions in the Q&A. So really quickly, I want you, when you get a chance, you want to go to your studentaid.gov, and I'm going to do this quickly, but no, you're going to get the recording. On your studentaid.gov, I want you to go to My Aid. And what I am going to show you is how to determine if you must consolidate by the deadline and how to determine if you should consolidate. There's people that must, and there's people that should because they potentially would benefit. Again, in general, there's really the exception Parent Plus, which we say reach out to us because that's a different conversation. With the exception of Parent Plus, there's really no major downside or no downside that I foresee right now if you consolidate your loans. Okay, so you're gonna scroll down to loan types under My Aid, and you're gonna go through each of the little drop down arrows. And what you're looking for is to make sure that if you have an outstanding balance, that loan, the name of that loan type is direct. It doesn't matter whether it's direct consolidation on subsidized, just make sure that it's direct. Again, exception, Parent Plus loans, different monster. You need to reach out for us to figure that out. So you're going to go through that. Now, people that must consolidate if you want to take advantage of the IDR account adjustment is people who have Perkins loans. So if you have a Perkins loan outstanding, you can consolidate just that Perkins loan. But if you're going to be consolidating for the fact that you have other loans, you could just do one consolidation together. Okay, so if you have Perkins and there's a balance, you would need to consolidate it in order to potentially get it to benefit from the IDR account adjustment. So you're going to go through each category. And again, you're looking to make sure that all your loans say direct. If your loans say FELP and there's a loan balance, you must. This is like must consolidate by April 30th. You only need to submit it. It doesn't need to be processed, right? If you leave this loan as a FELP, you're not going to potentially get credit. Especially for PSLF, you won't get retroactive credit. So for a lot of people, that means that you're missing out on a lot. So again, it doesn't matter whether it's subsidized or unsubsidized. You just want to make sure that all your loans say direct, and if you still have any balance under a FELP or a Perkins, that means you must consolidate. Okay, now who may want to consolidate, and we say you should, is people who may have different repayment history. So generally, what I do with my clients is I look at the latest loan balance, and obviously this is zero, but let's assume there was a loan balance here. I go here and I go through all the loans and I try to find the oldest loan first. And if you've consolidated the loans, you might have to trace it back a little bit more and all that. So what the IDR account adjustment is basically doing or saying, so let me choose the '07 loan, right? So I'm going to click view details. And then I'm going to come here and I'm going to click view loan status history. The IDR account adjustment is saying we will give you credit towards PSLF or IDRF or both if you want, and if you meet the employment requirement for PSLF. And we're going to give you credit and start counting from the time your loans enter repayment. Remember, we said any in-school deferment and the grace period, you're just not going to get credit, and with some exception, any time in default. But basically, the government would generally give credit from 2013 in this case, and I know that there's some forbearances. Chances are you will still get some of that credit. Don't quote me on it. There's some specific rules that you needed 12 consecutive, 36 cumulative, but in general, you should be fine. And then you'll get all the forbearance during COVID, right? This is what we're looking here, 2020. These loans were quote unquote paid in full, discharge 2021. So it doesn't reflect all the way through the end of COVID. But again, this is the way for you to get a sense of what's your oldest loan. And then you can go back and assess to figure out, well, did all my loans, I'm going back to 8 summary, did all my loans enter repayment at the same time? If all your loans enter repayment at the same time, because let's say you just got them for one particular degree, then you don't have to consolidate as long as they're direct. But if you feel that they enter repayment because you went to undergrad work and then graduate school, you could benefit from just consolidating everything.
And Carolina, can I just add that if you have a FELP consolidation loan, you can consolidate those. So if all you have is direct consolidation loans, if you have like just two direct consolidation loans, one subsidized, one unsubsidized, then you're as consolidated as you can get. But if you just have FELP consolidation loans, that can be consolidated. So essentially, you're going to convert that from a FELP consolidation loan to a direct consolidation loan, which will then be eligible for all of the things that we spoke about today.
And thank you, Nancy. That's a great point because a lot of people think that they've consolidated already. Another red flag or tip, if your loans are with Navian, AES, and some people with Nelnet, depending on the situation, you may still have those commercially held loans, especially Navian and AES, and you must consolidate. Now, people were asking, do I need to consolidate? I think someone asked, do I need to consolidate with Navian? And the answer is like, no, 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 no. All you need to do, you're going to go to loan repayment on your studentaid.gov. We're staying within the federal system. You're going to click consolidate loans. And I'm going to say restart the application. FSA is going to think that I'm like crazy because I've restarted the application so many times. And then you're just going to click apply now. And I'm not going to go through it because there's some contact info and it will take too much time. But you basically just go through the application. It's going to populate your contact info. It's going to populate your loans. You want to select all the loans that apply. If you have any questions, concerns, you can reach out to us. Now, there will be a question on you to select a servicer. If you're pursuing PSLF, it's going to ask you a question about that, and Mohila would be the servicer still today for you to select. If you're not pursuing public service loan forgiveness, we don't generally recommend any particular servicer, meaning we're not going to steer you to any. The ones that are processing consolidations a little bit faster because they're still in part a monopoly is Advantage. But I would say Advantage or Nelnet are still pretty safe bets in terms of servicers. Again, not recommending any in particular. just general sense there. You're going to be asked whether you want to delay the application. You have to say you do not want to delay the application because you want it to be processed immediately. And once you go through the whole application, there's a lot of terms and conditions. You just click next, next. You review and submit. And then once you do that, you can go back to your dashboard and it's going to be under your activities and it's going to say that it has been submitted. I want to emphasize if you're pursuing PSLF where you want to record your information, so it will be here, right? It's saying it's a draft because I didn't submit it. But if you're pursuing PSLF before the end of the month, you need to go to your Mojila account and download all your data. Again, we'll make sure you have the link to the video that gives you instructions on how to download that data. I will stop my share.
So,
Nancy?
yeah, let me just expand on a few things. Some additional questions came through. When you consolidate loans, if you notice that when you have loans, very often you have what's called subsidized versions of loans and unsubsidized versions of loans. So those can be direct subsidized or FELP subsidized or direct unsubsidized and direct and FELP unsubsidized. The subsidized component or designation just indicates whether interest is going to be covered by the government during over certain periods over the life of the loan. So with subsidized loans, as an example, while you're in a school deferment, you, the borrower, are not going to have to cover the interest that accrues on a subsidized loan during an in-school deferment. Generally speaking, for unsubsidized loans, you, the borrower, are going to be responsible for the interest that accrues throughout the life of the loan. When you consolidate your loans, they keep the subsidized loans separate from the unsubsidized loans. So if you have 12 loans and it's a combination of subsidized and unsubsidized loans, you're going to consolidate down to 2 loans. So you're going to get one loan is going to contain all the subsidized loans and one loan is going to contain all the unsubsidized loans. So if all you're left with at the end of the day is one direct consolidation loan that's unsubsidized and one direct consolidation loan that's subsidized, that is very common, and you now are as consolidated as you can get. So I just wanted to clarify that. The other thing that I also just want to make clear about the PSLF servicing changes, if you were planning to file an employment certification form, but you're not at the 100 or you're not going to be at the 120 qualifying payments over the next couple of months, probably the best bet is to wait until this transition occurs and then file the forms once everything is moved over to the Department of Education. Certainly what I don't think I would recommend right now is if you file a manual version of the form and upload that to Mojila, it's certainly not going to get processed before May, in which case you're just risking that it could get lost in the transition. So you certainly would want to hold off on that. If you want to file a form, regardless, or if you think you've met 120 qualifying payments, you want to file the form using the PSLF help tool and having your employer sign off electronically. So that way you're not having to upload anything. It's going to be fully in the system. And then hopefully it will be processed once they do all the transition. But just remember, these things are going to be delayed regardless of what you do at this point. Okay, anything else, Carolina?
I mean, no, nothing else from my end. I know it's a lot. So I want to say what Nancy said. If you think you need to meet the deadline or you don't know, um, make sure that you reach out to us before. We're going to try to get as many people in. If you are already with Mojila pursuing PSLF, reach out to us. We will try to book you. Let us know, and we'll try to book you as soon as possible, and take it from there. How do we know if our college loans, say with Navian, can be included in PSLF forgiveness? If it's a private loan, then it cannot be included as part of PSLF. Private loans cannot be converted into federal loans if that's the question. If you have a FELP with Navient, that can be converted into a direct and make eligible for PSLF. But again, if it's a private, which I know Navient has a portfolio of private loans, you cannot convert that into federal to make it eligible for PSLF. But reach out if you want to explore further your situation.
So I want to give one more opportunity. If I know there were a few raised hands earlier, if anybody wants to raise their hand and ask any final questions, we'll take those. Okay, I think Danielle, go ahead. Danielle, if you can unmute yourself.
Yep, I've just unmuted. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Great. Thank you so much for all of this great information. So I have loans held by Mohila that I believed were consolidated, but as you just said that all our unsubsidized loans would be in one bucket and all our subsidized loans would be in another bucket, I'm concerned that maybe I'm not that I'm not consolidated. I show one large loan amount and then have one monthly payment. Could you tell me from that whether I actually am consolidated or should I just complete the process through FSA just to be safe?
So there's two ways that you can look at it. You can look at it. No, we can't tell from just the because they give you a summary balance, which you could have one loan, you could have 17 loans just based on the summary balance.
Yeah.
You can look at the loan details within your Mohila account. So that breaks it down. Will show you exactly what you've got, what's got a balance and what doesn't have a balance. Or you can go through the FSA process that Carolina just demonstrated, and that will.
So there's no downside in going through the FSA process.
Oh no, you're just checking your account. No, that does nothing.
Great. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Okay. Anybody else? Okay, I don't see any hands raised. So with that, I just want to thank you again for enduring this this entire presentation. As Carolina says, I know it's a lot of information, but we hope that you found it helpful, and you can always contact us for additional information and additional assistance. So good luck to everybody. Thank you for attending, and we hope to hear from you soon.